What's up guys, Ivan Carranza here, and today we're gonna talk about the Mesa WD-800 amp. And if you've been following the channel, I've already done a full demo and review of the amp. I'm gonna put a card here and also a link in the description below for you to check that out. But the amp has been with me for about a year, and I figured I would talk about my experience so far with it, because a lot of these, YouTube demos and tests, or however you want to call them, people get the gear and sometimes they have like maybe a month, a couple of weeks, or sometimes even a few days to test the stuff and to record and promote the stuff, so to speak, or to showcase what the product can do. But I figure it would be kind of interesting to know my perspective, because I've been using it, like I said, for a year, and it's been in constant use. So it's kind of like a long-term review. So I'm going to talk about what features I really like, which features I think or I wish were maybe a bit different, or what I've noticed, in this period of using the amp for a year. So to begin, let me tell you like a short story, or a bit of background. I think it was 2018. Yeah, early 18. I bought the Mesa WD-800 Plus with my own cash, my own money, because I saw that they had a variable high-pass filter and also some very flexible EQs, and I tested it at a shop and I really liked the sound of it because it was a very transparent amp. It didn't add that much color if you didn't want to, and I really liked that because you could morph it into different kind of setups. And I was pretty happy with the setup that I had. I really liked that amp. And then Mesa released this one, and the idea of the tube preamp section really caught my attention. And then they released some videos on the amp, and I was like, whoa, it sounds really good. And I was lucky enough that they sent me one to test. And I also did a comparison between both amps, the D800 Plus and the WD800, which is going to be a card here as well, and a link in the description below. It's pretty long. I think it's go for like 15 minutes or 20, I'm not sure. It's good. I go into very, really into detail in there. But I had no intentions on keeping this amp. I just wanted to try it because I was pretty happy with the other one. But I liked it so much that I sold the D100 Plus and kept this. That doesn't mean that this is a better amp, so to speak. They're voiced differently. The sound of both amps when set flat is definitely different. Some people might prefer the D100 Plus, and other people might prefer this one. One big thing that I noticed, and I also invited some people to come and test it because I didn't know if I was like crazy or something, is the feel, the response of the amp. Andy, the guy who designs the Subway series, I don't know what he put in here, or if it's just because of the tube, but you get a very like spongy, squishy, lightly compressed sound, or feel, so to speak, actually feel, when playing the amp compared to other Class D amplifiers. It is like as if you were really playing a full-on tube amp. It feels like that, and it's kind of weird. That's actually the first time that I noticed. And one great way to compare this feature is if you record with DI out and then you switch between the pre-EQ and post-EQ mode, you definitely get that feel difference. It's really bizarre, but you definitely like notice it immediately after when playing. When you have it set to pre-EQ, it's much quicker, drier, so to speak, more, I don't want to say upfront, but much more direct, so to speak, okay? And when you turn it the post EQ, it feels a bit more responsive, a bit more dynamic. You get a more of it feels when you're really plucking the strings that you get something in there, providing not resistance, but it's kind of like a bouncy feel, and it just for me at least, I feel that I play a bit better, or the overall sound and also the dynamics and the recordings that I've done feel and sound better when I have that on, or when I use the amp in post EQ mode, or just generally when I play with the amp, because it's like I said, it provides a very like responsive dynamic feel. There are, however, situations when I do prefer to use it on pre-EQ mode, but that was one of the major factors that really caught my attention right away. When I turned it on and I played, I was like, whoa, this feels really good. Now, the second thing is the EQ section on the amp. It is usually, let me start by saying that I usually leave it flat. I just like the tone of the amp when it's flat. With that being said, probably the two controls that I turn around the most are the high pass filter, which is right here. You can see it, the variable high pass filter, and maybe the passive mid control. And having the variable high pass filter is definitely a lifesaver. I think a lot of other amp manufacturers could benefit from using that feature. I think it's very complicated to integrate because I think filters are like very tricky, mathematically to sort out. But even at home, when using the amp and when practicing, I can play with the amp pretty loud, and I save my neighbors, by just rolling out the high pass filter so that the people below me don't hear all the rumble. And it's not boomy. It is a lot more cleaner and focused, and that helps as well, not only when you're practicing at home, but when you're in stages that are kind of boomy or muddy and you don't have a bass definition. You can just roll up the high pass filter and you're gonna get a better focused sound, and it's gonna help you orient yourself in the whole mix of the band. I've also used it to record, and I'm gonna do a series on high pass filters, so it's gonna be a separate video, but I'm gonna show how the high pass filter works and when you record a signal with the high pass filter off and on. And even if you have it on the amp at the lowest setting, it is still active. I think at 25 hertz, minus 12 dB per octave, if I'm not mistaken. But this is definitely a very, very handy feature that I really like. Now, as far as the EQ goes, like I said, I usually just leave everything flat. Mainly, I might boost the bass a little bit if I need to feel a bit more of the bass on stage. When recording, I do boost it a bit more, but live, I haven't really found a reason to boost the bass because it's got plenty of low end, especially since it's getting, you can see it on here, but right beside me is the Mesa. I'm gonna put a picture, baby. There's my Mesa Subway 115-inch cap, and that thing sounds massive. So since getting that, I very rarely boost any bass. For the mids, you get the 3 bands, and even though I don't really use them that often, there's been situations where there was a frequency on stage that was either kind of like annoying me, or I wanted to boost a very specific frequency to hear myself better. And by sweeping the frequency and boosting, that is very, very helpful to have. For example, I think one of the last shows we played with the David Bowie tribute band, the engineer told me that he wanted a bit more definition on the top end. And then I just took the last mid frequency, which is the upper or high mids, and then I boosted quite a bit. I think maybe 10 dB, and then I started sweeping until he found a frequency that he was like, okay, that definitely works for me. And then I turned it back maybe at +3 or +4, and that was good. But being able to really pinpoint the frequency that you want and boost it or cut it is definitely helpful. For the treble, I rarely touch it, mostly if you want to cut top end, because the amp has plenty of natural top end on its own, so I really boost any treble. And the passive mid is definitely a very unique feature of the amp, because I usually have it all the way open because it is a cut only control. So by having it all the way open, it is kind of like flat. But with that being said, flat in relationship to the voice of the amp. If you want to have it close to flat of how your instrument sounds without any coloration, you're probably gonna find it around like 12 or 11 to 2 o'clock, depending on your instrument. Because if you have it fully open, you do have a bit of a mid bump, which is very helpful to be heard in a mix and to get more note definition. It is not like overbearing or super nasal or anything. It is helpful. It is a cool mid frequency to have, in my opinion, at least. That's the part for the EQ section. One other thing is I don't use it that much, but the power damping control, if you have it on low, it gives you even more of that spongy feel when playing through a cab, and the low end is not as direct or percussive. It's more like open, more of like a pillow of bass sound. That's how I would describe it after using it for some time. Most of the time I have it on the highest setting, because that way you get more of a low end punch and also more of a percussive sound as well, which I like. Now you might be thinking, okay, that's a lot of knobs, right? I don't want to have to deal with a lot of knobs. Me neither. I don't like to twist a lot of stuff. I just like to turn on stuff and that it works and sounds good. And like I said, I rarely boost or cut a lot of that stuff. But I know how they work. So if I need to boost or cut for a particular frequency, I can find it very fast and, boost or cut or correct the tone issue. And also one thing that I've noticed is that since I started having these semi-parametric mids, also my ear for certain frequencies has improved. I can tell, okay, I need more of, I don't know, let's say around 500 hertz, or I need more about of 1.5K, sorry, or more top end. Maybe I can boost at 3K, and those things, knowing what kind of frequencies you can boost or cut definitely makes your job as a bass player a bit easier, because certain pieces of gear boost or cut frequencies, even though they're all called treble or bass or mids, they're set at different frequencies. So knowing when or where each one boosts or cuts is definitely kind of useful. So that's for the front end. Now, another thing that I like is that on the back, you've got the option of hooking up to 4 cabinets if you run it on 2 ohm mode. I've never done that. I usually play with PA support, and 1 cab is mostly enough just to hear myself, and then front of house is getting my DI signal. But if you're playing with a limited PA support, or you just have to rely on your bass amp to fill a room, having the option to have up to 4 cabs in 8 ohm configuration definitely is super useful, because you can run like 4 115 cabs, or like 2 212s, or like two fridges, like what would it be, like 4 4x10 cabs, no, 4 2x10 cabs. So that's pretty cool. Also, if the cabinet that you currently have is rated at below 400 watts, which the amp puts out at 8 ohms, you can use the 2 ohm mode to deliver lower wattage to the cabinet, so it's going to perform a bit better and you don't risk damaging it because of the power that the amp is putting out. That's something that I did when I had my previous cabinet, for example. Other than that, you get the effects loops and headphone output, which has a cabinet simulation as well in there to practice. You got tuner out, auxiliary in, and a very cool feature is the ability to switch between mic and line level. And that's going to come back to another point that I'm going to mention later. But being able to control the input or the output level for recording or for the console for front of house is definitely very, very useful. And lastly, the DI on the amp is very, very good. It was designed, by Andy, who designs the Subway gear. He has a lot of years of live sound experience, so he put a lot of attention into putting a quality DI in here to make the best sound possible come out of the amp. And I've used the amp quite a few times instead of taking my pedal board, I just took the head and took the DI out of from here and just EQ on the amp and then send that to front of house and post EQ, and they were always happy because it's got a great sound. Now, as far as the things that I kind of wish were maybe a bit different, first of all, I know it's got probably a good reason for being this big. It's not that it's huge or massive or anything, but it is definitely like an extra piece of luggage when carrying it around, because you can see it is, you know how big it is. Look at my hand. Probably the whole components that are in here, you know, they have to fit into this enclosure, and there's no other way to put it in a smaller, you know, form factor. But it would be really cool if it could be a bit smaller. It's not like a major deal breaker because you're getting a lot of great features, but it is most of the time it's an extra piece of luggage you have to carry around, and most of the time I travel by train or I walk. And what I've been doing is I've been putting the amp with its case on a backpack where I keep my clothes, so that I don't have to carry really an extra bag with me, because I'm gonna take the backpack anyway. So I just put it in there and then travel with that. As far as the weight goes, I think it weighs like 3.5 kilo. It's not like massive, but there are some other Class D amps that are a bit lighter. Like I said, I'm just being very nitpicky here, but it would be really cool if it would be a tiny bit smaller or a tiny bit lighter, but that just being, you know, super picky. It's a very light head compared to, you know, a tube amp or Class A or whatever bass amp head, because it's still easy to carry around. The other thing that I kind of wish there was an extra feature for that was the ability to control the output level of the post EQ DI, like maybe like a, you know, a knob or something, because I really like how the amp sounds when you push the gain and you start getting some tube overdrive, and that is 100% safe. You can do it. You're not gonna break the amp. It's actually made for that as well. The problem with that is maybe on your amp, you know, you can control how loud it's gonna be by using the master volume. But even when the DI is set to mic level, which is quieter than line level, you're still sending a pretty loud signal to a console or to a recording interface. So when I'm recording and I want to use the overdrive on this, I really have to just bump the input gain on my interface just a little bit, because otherwise it's already too loud. If there was a possibility to have like maybe a second channel, or maybe like I said, a knob to control the output of the overdrive section, for example, that would be really cool. Here on the WD-800 we already have a variable high pass filter, and recently I saw another bass company release an amp that had a low pass filter, which, you know, is a high cut. You know, it cuts high frequencies, and I think that could be really useful to integrate in some way, if possible, to remove unwanted high frequencies from the DI signal. Not so much on the cabinet, because the cabinet already rolls off high frequencies, depending on how high you set the tweeter and the speaker design. But on a DI signal, you get the whole spectrum of sound, you know, from 20 to 20k hertz, and being able to remove some of that unwanted fret noise, for example, or unwanted uncomfortable or annoying upper frequencies would be, I think, a very handy feature to have. Probably front of house would use one on you as well, but I think it would be maybe a cool feature to integrate if possible. Overall, this is definitely a killer amp. I've said it a million times. I really like it. Chances are that if you've watched one of my videos, I took the DI out from here to record because I just like it so much. And just things to consider would be that it definitely has its own voice. You know, it's got an edge, it's got character, it's got some bite that you might not want. You might prefer a more tamer or more transparent, flatter amplifier, or a darker one, because it's definitely pretty mid-forward, I would describe it. Not like honky, like annoying mid, but it definitely has an edge to it. But other than that, I just love the app. I think the guys at Mesa definitely did a great job on this, and I'm gonna keep using it every time I can. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay up to date with the content that's coming to the channel. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Take care.